Today's reading comes from Rays of the One Light, weekly commentary on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. This week, the promise of the Scriptures. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it and your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 15, we read the famous parable of the prodigal son. Jesus tells us of the man who took the wealth bestowed on him by his father and squandered it in foreign lands, where he fell into evil ways. At last, repentant, he returned to his father's home. When his father saw him, he was, as Jesus tells us, moved with compassion and ran and fell upon his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee. I am no longer worthy to be called thy son." But the father said to his servants, "Fetch quickly the best robe and put it on him, and give him a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and bring out the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and make merry, because this my son was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and is found." And they began to make merry. Small-hearted human beings, identified as they are with their little egos, give exaggerated importance to any slight they receive from others. Thus, they imagine God, like them, to be petty, unpardoning, and vindictive. In God's eyes, however, when human beings go astray, there is nothing to forgive. All of us are aspects only of his own self. He who made us resides in us. He is not far away from us in some far-off heaven. His call to us always is to return to our own home within. The way of return is described in the Bhagavad Gita in the 6th chapter. Supreme blessedness is that yogi's who has completely calmed his mind, controlled his ego-active tendencies, the rajas, and purged himself of desire, thereby attaining oneness with Brahma, the infinite spirit. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
For those of you who don't know us, my name is Manisha, and this is my husband, Dambara. And it's our joy to be spending this Sunday morning with all of you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy lives to come here and worship with everyone else. I'd like to read something from Whispers from Eternity, which is a book of prayer demands and lovely writings and poems from Paramahansa Yogananda. And this particular prayer is titled, "I Demand to Return Home." Impediments beware, flee my path. I am homeward bound. Through the long corridors of time, stumbling often into pits of error, then lifted out by thy unseen hand, I have walked painfully. discouraging darkness, barbed wire fences of habit, stony embankments of indolence, mountains of indifference, oceans of unfaithfulness, sirens of sense-longing may stand even now in my path, as if to prevent my onward march to thy palace. But 1,000,000 kingdoms and sextillions of years of unblemished worldly happiness will never tempt me again to turn away from thee. I'm popping.
I promised her this wouldn't make a difference if it was right in front of her mouth. It wouldn't pop at all, but I was wrong.
I have microphone karma. Oftentimes, I'll walk up to a microphone and it'll go pop, and it's dead. So this is less traumatic unless we can deal with this one. So there's a wonderful Sanskrit word, smriti, and smriti is defined as the remembrance of what is. Remembrance of that which is. It's a divine remembrance of everything that is. There's the example that you could think about is imagine that you're living your ordinary life and you have a job that is not very rewarding, but there isn't anything else for you to do, so you're working away at this job years and years into this job, and then one day 3 people walk into your office and their faces are aglow and they're just so happy to see you, and you've never seen them before as far as you know, and they proceed to tell you that years ago when you were just a child, a very, very young child, that you had lived in a fine palace because you were the heir apparent to this small country. And maybe it's a country in Europe or, wherever you want to put that country that really draws you. But you were the heir to this small country. But when you were a child, turmoil broke out in the country, and they took you and they hid you away for safekeeping so that you would not be captured by the bad guys and destroyed and denied your birthright. And so now things were peaceful in your country and you could return safely. And they were there to escort you home back to the place that you had sort of remembered in the back of your mind, these big, beautiful rooms with tall windows and sunlight streaming across this floor and toys, very elaborate toys that you would work with every day, and it was just such a rich life, and those memories had sort of faded into the background, and you had finally assumed they were just dreams. But now they come back and they flood you with smriti. You remember that is where you belong, that is where you came from. So you go back to your country with to great acclaim and the love of the people that have been waiting for your return, and your world finally makes sense again. That's smriti. When I was in high school, I started having these recurring dreams about an apple orchard, and I didn't know where the apple orchard was. My dreams are always pretty vague and not remembered very well, but this one was a recurring dream, so I got a good chance to look at it. And the orchard was taken care of by a group of friends who, this was their sustenance, but they lived a life of joy and happiness and friendship. And I longed for that orchard. During the dream, my heart just yearned for it. And I never acted on it when I was awake. I could have gotten in my car and gone driving and looking for it, using it as a sign, a signal that I should go, that this was my birthright, this apple orchard surrounded by friends. But I never did. I had different duties and relationships and entanglements, and I just went from one job to the next, and I never went looking for that orchard. And so the memory sort of faded away, and I forgot about the orchard. And then I went to the village, and at first my visits to the village were just really focused on the expanding light, and so I didn't really venture out that much. But maybe on the third or fourth visit, I discovered the apple orchard. There it was, next to the meadow, that huge meadow that is right at the entrance, and Master's Market is over here, and there's this apple orchard there, and I thought, this is it. I recognized it. I had a moment of smriti where I realized that I had been tuning into the early years of Ananda with this loving community, and this apple orchard was there. And I thought, oh my God, I could have found Ananda at the beginning of my life instead of halfway through my life. Why didn't I go and follow that dream and really explore and find out? And I probably would have found Ananda when I was a teenager. And then I luckily remembered that remorse is not one of the 8 manifestations of God. So using remorse was not going to take me to any deeper understanding of this experience. And so I sort of worked backwards, that I hadn't gone looking for the orchard, and God doesn't make mistakes. So I must have not been meant to find the orchard that early. And reflecting on it, I really believe that I had a lot of lessons that I had to learn out in the larger world. I learned how to make money. I learned how to get along with people. I learned how to not be stubborn about everything going my way. I learned a lot of things in the rougher, larger world that if I hadn't gone through that process, I wouldn't have appreciated what I had when I did go to Ananda. So I needed to learn, I needed to fall into the debauchery of the material world. And then I could go back home, have my smriti. And the great gift was that I'd had those dreams, so that when I saw the orchard and that smriti flooded through me, I knew that I was in the right place. It confirmed and supported my belief that Ananda was my spiritual home, and that this was where I could find the truth that I had been seeking all of my life. So it was an enormous gift to have had those dreams, not acted on them, seeing the orchard and realizing why I didn't act on it. It just all came into this crystal clear affirmation of the truth of the spiritual path. So we all take different paths. Everybody's spiritual path looks a little bit different because we're all unique individuals. There's a story of Krishna who is walking around the countryside in India, and he has with him a companion that often traveled with him, Nakula, and they've disguised themselves so no one will recognize them, and they just oftentimes would wander around the countryside, interacting with people, just seeing how life was going for everybody. And they would bless people as they went by, and they just would oftentimes go on these journeys. And so Krishna and Nakula are on one of their journeys, and they're walking down this road, and they come across a very humble farm. And there's just like one small pasture that's just sort of scratched out of the surrounding vegetation, and they see a little tiny ramshackle house with a lean-to where there's a cow tied up, and the cow is emaciated, and it's just a very, very deep poverty on this farm. And Krishna walks over to the house and knocks on the door, and this old man comes to the door, and his back is bent, and he's using a cane to walk, and the man invites Krishna and Nakula in, please come into my humble home, and he serves them the crust of bread and the remnants of his porridge that were going to be his dinner. He gave them to his guests. And they sat and spent the evening together, and then the old man showed them the corner of the room where there was a straw mattress and gave them the only thin blanket that he owned and said, "Please sleep here." And then he went outside to the lean-to and slept next to the cow so that they could have the luxury of his straw mattress. And in the morning, the old man came out, and he came out of the lean-to as Krishna and Nakula are leaving, and he gives them a jar with the morning's milk from his poor, emaciated cow, and that was going to be his meal for that day, and he gave it to them so that they would have something on the road that would nourish them. And so Nakula and Krishna leave, and they're walking down the road, and Krishna turns back and looks at the little house, and he says, "I'm going to take away his cow." And Nakula thinks, "Why?" But this is the Lord Krishna, and he doesn't question him. He knows he can learn from him. So they go along the road, and they're walking further, and it's as the day starts to wane, they come across another farm, and this is a huge estate. And they're walking past it for quite a while, and they find the road that leads up to the main house, and they're walking past pastures with sheep and goats, with kids and lambs playing and frolicking, and there's cattle and oxen and goats and just everything that a prosperous farm would love to have any portion of, and this estate has it all. So they finally walk up to this grand house and knock on the front door, and the master of the estate comes out and greets them and is pretty cool, and he points over to an outbuilding and says, "You can sleep there tonight. You're welcome to sleep there. You'll find straw there. You can sleep there." And then so Krishna and Nakula go, and they have to go in the doorway, and it's all dark and low and not at all welcoming, but there is some straw there. So they go in there for the evening, and a little while later, a servant comes out and brings them 2 bowls of rice and some green bananas, and without a word just sets them on the floor and then turns and leaves. And so they eat their rice and their green bananas, and they stretch out and sleep. And the next morning they get up and come out of the shed, and there's just nobody around, so they just go on their way and walk past all those pastures back to the main road and walk along the main road. And as they're walking away, Krishna turns back and looks at the estate, and he says, "I'm going to double his wealth." So now Nakula's saying, "Okay, I don't get it. I just don't get it. Why punish the old man who was so generous to us and reward this man who has so much and was so little and stingy in his generosity? I don't understand." And Krishna said, "The man with the cow, there is a strong attachment to that cow, and the cow is the only thing that is keeping him from God. He loves the cow, cares for it. It's the last thing he has. It reminds him of his wife, and it is the only thing preventing him from turning fully toward God. So by taking his cow away, I'm giving him the opportunity to merge fully into the infinite." And then this man still believes that his happiness, that his joy, that his purpose in life comes from his estate. He's worked all of his life to build it up to what it is today, and everything that he has put into this estate. And meanwhile, he is empty and desperate inside. By doubling his wealth, I also double his troubles, so that he can learn, that he can realize that having twice as much of what he thought was the meaning of his life would give him the chance to understand that it doesn't come from outside of himself. So this is his next step on his spiritual journey. So this is the story of the prodigal son. The the man who has to go out and try all of these different things in order to accumulate wealth around him and build everything up, and it just doesn't work for him. It doesn't take him where his soul wanted to go. And then the older man who is steadfast and loyal and has already turned his heart to God. Those are very different paths to truth, because we're all unique. We're unique individuals. We're unique souls. So where one man needs more wealth, the other man needs deeper impoverishment, and both of those will take them to the true source. So we're all different. We all go about things in a different way. And this reading doesn't mention it, but there's actually another son. The prodigal son has a brother, and the brother stayed home and helped take care of the estate. Thank you. And so, what about him? He has stayed home all of these years. He watched while his father divided the wealth of the family and gave half of it to his oldest son, who then went away and just completely wasted that inheritance. And meanwhile, he stayed, he helped, he made the hard decisions, he worked hard every day supporting his father, helping on the estate. And now here comes this jerk back, and everything is offered to him again. Like, how does he feel? What does that do to him? And the lesson there is that the wealth of the universe, the riches of the universe, are infinite. The father could absolutely give half of his wealth to the one son, enabling him to go out and take the journey that would let him learn the lesson that is not, that those activities would not take him closer to God. Whereas the younger son stayed and helped and nurtured something within himself, and when the older son came back, there was still enormous wealth that could be again offered to the son who had done the work he needed to do in order to walk back into that smriti. After all of that suffering that he had undergone, he walked in and back to that comfort and security and unconditional love. What a great gift. And for the other son to witness that and realize that the riches of the universe are infinite. We have enough to go around. What is important is that everybody follow the path that will take them closer to God. We have an intern that's living out at Laurelwood. Her name is Amber, and she and I drove into town on Friday to go pick up coffee bags for the garden. And so we had the cargo van, and as we're driving away from Laurelwood, we're driving out of the parking lot, and Dambara waves us down and said, our neighbor is giving us this free Christmas tree, and it's huge. It'll go, wait till you see it. It's going to fill up this corner. It's just huge. And he said, since you're going into town, let's load this up, and can you take it to the temple? And we said, sure. And so Mayatri and Amber and Dambara and I, this thing that was 10 times bigger than all of us put together. It was just huge, and trying to get it into the van, and we got it in, and the top, we had to curl at the top in order to close the door. It's like 12 feet tall, maybe. It's enormous. So we're driving into town, and it's covered with ladybugs. And these ladybugs start crawling all over Amber and me. And I'm more covered up than she is, so they're not bothering me too much. But poor Amber is just constantly trying to get the ladybugs off of her. And she's just very, very uncomfortable with this. And I'm thinking, why are we doing this? The auction is tonight. The auction starts in about 2 hours. Why do we think that we can bring this tree over to the temple and that there'll be enough people for us to take this enormous tree out of the van and carry it out to the patio out here. We are blowing it big time. Like we're both miserable with these ladybugs. We're going to be late for the coffee bag lady. And like, this was insane. And so sure enough, we got here and we parked out there and got as close to the gate as we could. And we left all the doors open so the ladybugs could escape. And we came in, and the first people we ran into were Michelle and Rose. And we explained that we had this free Christmas tree from our neighbor, and it was perfect for the temple, and we needed help carrying it in. And just immediately, they didn't even blink an eye, and they rounded up people, and there were like 6 or 8 of us out there, all women, so there wasn't huge muscle out there, but there was 8 of us, and we got that enormous tree out of the van, because when it went in the van, we put it in the door that it could barely squeeze through, and all the limbs squished down as it was going in. And then as we're pulling it out, all the limbs do this, and they catch on the side of the door. So it was quite a challenge to get it out, but we did. And we dragged it over and set it over here so that Vajra and Dambara could work on it and get it in water later that night. And, we all felt so victorious. We had done it. And it took about 8 minutes because the riches of the universe are infinite. They had the time to come out and help us, even though they were setting up everything that was going to happen 2 hours later. And it was fun, and we spent quite a bit of our energy laughing, and it just worked out perfectly. Yesterday I was talking with Jojoli, and she was describing how when she came home on Friday or Saturday, that when she drove up the driveway, she saw someone else from Laurelwood working on the same project that she had worked on the day before. And it just filled her with a sense of joy because she had stepped into the energy and taken it as far as she had time for. And now here was this other person stepping into it and taking it a step forward. And that sense of community and joined action and many hands make a miracle. The riches of the universe are infinite. There is so much energy and riches and love and friendship that we share with each other that just completely transform our lives and enrich us. So the paths toward God are so varied, so different from each other. But we have this shared sense of joy, that joy that is within us, that is the signpost that we are on the right path, that we are moving in the right direction, that it is going to take us to God. With these experiences like Smriti and many hands making a miracle, and that we are accepting of everybody else's journey as they find their way, and we support them with love and kindness. This is the story of the prodigal son. And we will soon all step back into that safety and unconditional love that is our true heritage, that is our true home in God.